Yo, what up? Welcome to the Week 11 Avenger League preview. Now featuring a little bit of a playoff preview as well. I've run through a couple of the numbers and I have a few scenarios, not all of them, because there's 5 teams currently fighting for the fourth spot, or I guess third and fourth spot, really, with Charlie dropping to 6 and 4. So I've run through a couple scenarios and pointed out and have some data for all 5 teams fighting for that spot. I didn't include in this. I did not include John and Trevor, who are technically not actually eliminated from the playoffs yet, mathematically. I didn't go through their record against what would be the tiebreaker here, which in that data they could very well be eliminated, but record-wise they're not yet technically. And then I didn't include Cameron as well, because Cameron, to be involved in this, would essentially have to lose out, and I don't really think that's I mean it's possible, but I don't really see it. I did include Raleigh, because also, once again, to be included in this, he would have to lose out, but he has some very important games remaining on his schedule as far as the tiebreakers go, and that could sway things against his direction. Cameron only plays Tim, who would be involved in the tiebreaker. And once again, he would have to lose all 3 games to be eliminated, and at this point, I don't really see that happening. Raleigh could, because of just the massive amount of injuries that we'll talk to when we get to his team. So it's not completely out of the question that could happen to Raleigh. The likeliness of it happening is kind of low, but it's not. It's more likely at this point, I think, than Cameron is. So, as far as what I've got compiled together, I went through all, and it's actually 6 teams now that I'm including Riley in it, but the 5 teams are Charlie, Andrew, myself, Tim, and Wade. Me, Charlie, and Andrew all at 6 and 4. Tim and Wade at 5 and 5. Right there in the thick of it. Cameron is 7 and 3. Riley 8 and 2. We've all seen the standings. Riley, Cameron, Charlie, Andrew, myself, maybe me. Me, Wade, and Andrew have been playing Ring Around the Rosie with that 4th spot all year. But myself, then Tim in 6th, Wade in 7th, John in 8th, Trevor in 9th, and then 1 win Ashley. Who did she beat? I don't even remember it. She beat trophy wise. There she is. She beat. Oh yeah, it was Trevor in that wild week 2 game where Tyreek and Jalen went bananas. So getting into the scenarios now. We're starting with Raleigh. Raleigh against that group of 6 people is 5 and 1, with Andrew and Charlie remaining. So. As much as we want a scenario where Raleigh could fall out of the playoffs, I actually don't think it's possible. I haven't done the exact numbers, but even if he loses his 3 remaining games, 2 of those being against people who are in the mix, Andrew and Charlie, his worst case scenario is 8 and 5 with a 5 and 3 record against kind of this field. And actually all 6 of us can reach 8 and 5. But there's already some people he is beating with that record, and I'll get to that in a minute. Next is Charlie. He is 4 and 2 against the field, with myself and Raleigh still on the schedule. Wade is 2 and 4 against the field, with myself and Andrew. Andrew actually has the most ability. Andrew completely controls his own destiny. He wins out, he's in the playoffs. Which is, I guess, the case for most people. But even if he goes 2 and 1, he is in the playoffs, I believe, because he is 2 and 3 currently. So he has one of the lower records against the field right now, only in front of Wade and Tim. But he plays Tim, Raleigh, and Wade. So Andrew, win and you're in. I am 3 and 2 with Charlie and Wade left. And Tim is 1 and 4 with Andrew left. So Tim's path to the playoffs is win out. Win all 3 games, because he only has 1 game left against the tiebreaker group, and he's only got 1 win over the tiebreaker group so far. And So it's another couple interesting things here. So I played Charlie this week, which is, there's only 2 games between people in this group. It's me against Charlie, and it is Andrew against Tim. Real interesting here. A Andrew win essentially eliminates John, Trevor, and Tim. Tim, if you lose this week, you are out of the playoff hunt. You would be, your best case scenario would be 6-7 and 2-5 against the field if everybody else, if the 4th spot came down to 6-7, which I don't think is possible with the playoff. Basically, if Tim loses, or more, if Andrew wins, John and Trevor, no matter what they do, cannot get into the field because I play Charlie this week and one of us has to win. So 2 teams, at least 2 more teams at the end of this, are going to have 7 wins, which is not possible for Trevor or John. So John and Trevor, your only hope is win and pull for Tim. And if Andrew wins, his best case scenario going forward would be, his worst case scenario going forward would be 7-6 and 3-5 against the field. Obviously, if Andrew wins out, he's in the playoffs. Doesn't matter. Even, like I said, even if he goes 2-1, I believe he's there because he has he's so stacked with people against the field. So that's kind of Tim and Andrew's breakdown. Myself and Charlie. Charlie winning would essentially lock him into the playoffs. He's there. He would he'd have 7 wins, which I think at this point is kind of the threshold for it. If 2 more teams get to 8 wins, obviously he's eliminated at that point, but I don't think that's possible. Not possible, but not likely. So Charlie winning kind of locks him into the playoffs, even if he happens to turn around and drop his last 2 games, one of them being against Raleigh. And Charlie, if he wins this week, could actually put up a fight for the 1 seed, but should probably have a really good shot at the 2 seed because he plays Raleigh. And then on the flip side, if I win, I would be 7-6 and 4-3 against the field, which I feel like would put me in that's worst case scenario. That's including a loss to Wade, and John, which would be my 6 losses, which I feel like kind of gets me right in the mix of things. So 7-6, 4-3 against the field, pretty good shot to make the playoffs. So me and Charlie kind of in not an elimination game, more of if we win, we're set up really, really well to make the playoffs. Anyway, that's a quick breakdown. There's a lot more behind the scenes head-to-head matchups, shenanigans that go into this. And that's why I didn't even bother doing a full spreadsheet or full data this week, because there's just too many possible outcomes. With 6 teams, technically 7 if you want to include Cameron, because he is in the conversation. I just think the way his team's set up right now, he's gonna be record-wise above most people. So that's your playoff picture going forward. Raleigh, probably go ahead and get ready for the playoffs. You're in. Charlie, you beat me this week. You're in. Wade, you kind of need to beat you need to beat me and Andrew. The 3rd game, which I don't even remember who you're playing that week. It might be Trevor. I think it is. If you beat me and Andrew, you're in. Andrew win this week and you're probably in. Basically everybody on this list needs to win this week is what I'm getting down to. Anyway, enough rambling about numbers that don't make sense because they're very haphazardly thrown together. Let's get into what happened this week. So we'll start with the waiver wire ads as always. I picked up Hollywood Brown about 30 minutes ago while taking a shit. Practicing this week, so I can't quit the Cardinals apparently. Charlie picked up MVS off of Kansas City. Trevor picked up Dawson Knox. I assume he has some tight end troubles, maybe a bye week. We'll see when we get to him. Trevor also picked up Rashad White, who may be taking over the backfield in Tampa Bay. So interesting ad there. Riley added Foster Moreau off of the Goddard news that he is going to IR. John picked up Christian Watson, who kind of had a breakout game. Wade picked up Cole Kmet. I'm surprised actually Cole Kmet made it that far on the waivers. That's interesting. Not that I would have gotten him. That's not what I'm saying, but that's interesting that it happened. Trevor also picked up Allen Robinson, and then we got a bunch of defenses and kickers because bye weeks are happening and people are streaming. Okay. So getting into the actual breakdowns, the actual games. Raleigh is playing Trevor in a rematch, looking to avenge one of his 2 losses. I don't actually think he gets a chance to avenge against Wade unless they meet in the playoffs, but Raleigh playing Trevor. Raleigh is in a pretzel right now, and actually so is Trevor. This game, as insane as the first game was, where I think what it was at 150 to 130. This one might stink. If we're going down Raleigh's team, Lamar Jackson healthy, fine, playing Carolina, he'll put up numbers. Ezekiel Elliott questionable, and Tony Pollard looking better in the backfield. Hasn't played in 2 weeks? Did he play last week? No, he didn't play last week. I didn't think he did. Hasn't played in 2 weeks. May not play. So, Aaron Jones. No injury designation anymore. Game Thursday night against a pretty good Titans rush defense. But game at home, the Packers kind of look like they figured their shit out. So, Aaron Jones should be fine. DeAndre Hopkins, obviously he's fine. Maybe without Kyler Murray again, but even with Colt McCoy, he put up 15 points and 98 yards. I don't know if he can repeat that, especially against the 49ers, who have one of the better defenses in the league, especially up front. And if it's Kyler Murray, I feel more comfortable because he's just a little bit more elusive and can evade the pass rush a little bit and still have time to get the ball to D-Hop. Colt McCoy, I think if he plays, it's going to be a bloodbath. And then we get into where the injuries really start to take their toll. Deontay Johnson is starting in his wide receiver 2 slot against the Bengals, who currently have the 5th lowest points allowed to wide receivers. The divisional rivalry game. The Bengals are wearing the all whites. Kenny Pickett stinks. So, yikes there. Foster Moreau, who, he's got a bigger role in the offense after Darren Waller went out last week. He had a touchdown. So, every tight end not named Kelsey or Andrews is kind of just a throw at a dartboard at this point. Just pray they score a touchdown. And then we have the new starter in Kansas City, Isaiah Pacheco. Coming off of his highest yardage total this season. Yep, it is by a decent margin. Had 82 yards last week. Did lose a fumble, which hurt his numbers a little bit. But he is the starter in Kansas City, so that's what you can say about him there. It is tough. We go down to the bench. Goddard, IR. Gus Edwards, questionable. Jamar Chase, out. Not on IR, but out. Probably should have been on IR. Cooper Kupp, IR. Yeah, Raleigh is in a mental space right now that I do not envy. And that's coming from a person who hasn't scored 100 points since week 4, I think. Now going over to Trevor's team, who different cause for the issues, but very, very similar issues. So I'm gonna read the players that Trevor has on a bye this week. That is Tua Tagovailoa. That is Kenneth Walker. That is Tyreek Hill, Chris Godwin, and Rachaad White. That is at least 3 starters, probably 4. We'll go ahead and call Chris Godwin a starter. And honestly, you probably would have started Rachaad White this week. Maybe not. Maybe not over Josh. Yikes. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players on a bye in a game that Trevor needs to win to stay alive in the playoffs. Luckily, he's playing the most injured team in the league in Raleigh. He's got Dak Prescott playing the Vikings, which I don't think the Vikings, allowing the 24th highest fantasy points to quarterbacks at the moment, coming off of his best game since coming back from injury and season fantasy wise anyway. No, it's not. It's Chicago. Yeah. Oh, because he had a rushing touchdown. Last week at 265 yards, 3 passing touchdowns. Did throw 2 interceptions, which hurt his numbers a little bit there. But I mean, it's Dak Prescott. He's got great wide receiver. Michael Gallup's pretty good. Got a reliable tight end. Good O line. He should be fun. Josh Jacobs is just still, even on just an awful Raiders team, and I mean horrible Raiders team, is still just putting up pretty good numbers. He kind of cooled off, which, cooling off from 32, 27, and 35 in 3 straight games, with a bye week mixed in between. That definition of cooling off is a lot different than most people's. But last week against Indy, he had 19.6 points, 78 yards, and a touchdown, and 30 receiving yards. Josh Jacobs does have a really, really tough matchup against Denver. And same goes for Davante Adams. Obviously teammates there. And Davante Adams actually looks like he limited in practice. I assume he's not going to sit out. The last 2 weeks for Davante Adams, 146 yards and a touchdown against Jacksonville, 126 yards and a touchdown. Sorry, 2 touchdowns against Jacksonville, 126 yards and a touchdown against the Colts. New Orleans, they got blanked. But that is the only game. The New Orleans game is one of 2 games he's had this season without breaking 10 points. He's gone over 100 yards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. He's very easily Derek Carr's favorite target. The problem is he gets one of, if not the best corner in the league right now in Patrick Surtain. Probably going to be shadowing him. I think they do shadowing in Denver. So not quite the schedule he's had where he's put up the big numbers. All of his games over 20 points. He played the Chargers, awful defense. He played the Chiefs, awful defense, awful secondary anyway. Played the Jags, not great secondary, and he played the Colts, bad secondary. The games where he played good secondaries are good corners. Houston, he had 14. Obviously, Derek Stingley, the rookie over there, really good. He against New Orleans with Lattimore, which that whole game was kind of an anomaly, but he had 1 catch for 3 yards. And Arizona, not a good defense, but he had 8.2 points. So Davante Adams, he's still Davante Adams. I'm sure he'll probably get 10 to 15 points, but I don't expect the big 25 to 30 bomb that we've kind of come to expect from him. Allen Robinson is interesting. He's playing New Orleans, so New Orleans may have packed it in at this point. It's really hard to tell. He hasn't had a great season. Hasn't had the season we all expected. But now with Cooper Kupp out, he's kind of becoming the number 1 option with Van Jefferson, I guess 1A, 1B. The problem is just, do we trust Matt Stafford? And Matt Stafford still racist. So that is going to be tough. Ben Skowronek probably going to have a huge week with Cooper Kupp down. So I don't really know what to expect out of Allen Robinson without Cooper Kupp. Is he good enough to be a number 1 wide receiver and actually, get open against your number 1 corner or, whatever you're going to scheme against for the number 1 receiver? We'll see. I think no. Dawson Knox, very touchdown dependent. Kind of the same with Foster Moreau on the other side. And then Mecole Hardman. I mean, you talk about just the dart at a wall. His last 4 games, he's broken 10 points. His last 3 games, he scored a touchdown. That's super encouraging. Juju, I believe, is going to be out this week with a concussion. I'll look at it when I get over to Tim's team. So, if Juju's out, then sure, I love it because, he probably your number 1 target, but Kadarius Toney's kind of taken over. So, really, really something to keep an eye on there. But Mecole Hardman, I mean, he's got big playability. He can go 80 yards in the blink of an eye. And at this point, with Tyreek Hill, Chris Godwin on buys, I mean, that's what you got to hope for. So, This is such a tough game to figure out. If we're going with just the person who has the most star power still available, I have to go with Trevor, and I actually think the first time this season, I will predict Raleigh to lose a fantasy football game. Yeah, I'm gonna do it. Um, I'm gonna kick Raleigh's down. Trevor's gonna win this week, setting Raleigh up for the worst case scenario, which is like a 3 seed in the playoffs. So that's the game this week. What looked to be just a thrilling matchup 3 weeks ago, however long it was ago. I don't think anybody realized that Trevor's entire team was going to be on a bye when they played again, so that's tough. All right, getting into the next game, which would be your 2 seed, which forever would mean I'm jumping to Charlie. Now it means I'm jumping to Cameron, who is playing against Ashley, who I've gotten to know very well over the last 2 weeks. Great battle. Yeah. This is probably the strongest complete team right now with Cameron. You know, when everyone's healthy, Raleigh still has the best team, but Cameron has been able to avoid injuries, and right now has the strongest team and would probably be the odds-on favorite to win the league this year. Patrick Mahomes, Kamara, Barkley, Diggs, London, Tyler Lockett or Keelan Allen, when either one of them are available, or Christian Kirk, but Drake London's in there right now. The one thing you can say about Cameron's, or Ashley's hope of winning this week, is that Cameron is dealing with some bye fuckery of his own. He's got Tyler Lockett and Christian Kirk both on a bye this week, which, isn't the biggest loss in the world, but when your replacement options are Drake London and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it's not exactly what I want to see in the lineup. Luckily, both of them do have good matchups. Drake London is playing Chicago. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is playing the Chargers on Sunday night. So both will have an opportunity to do some things. I don't trust Drake London's quarterback to get him the ball, and I don't trust Clyde Edwards-Helaire to run at all, ever. Or touch the ball. I think last week he was in, 4 snaps, didn't carry the ball, and had 1 target, which he did not catch. So, pretty tough week to come off of, especially against a not great Jaguars defense. But Cameron's got the star power to make it up in other positions. Patrick Mahomes, Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley. Kamara gets the Rams. Barkley gets the Lions. Holy shit. Yikes. On the other side, Ashley, Tom Brady's on a bye, so she will likely be starting Stafford, who right now has a questionable designation. Because he had the weird midweek concussion, but practiced fully on Wednesday. Should be fine to go. So Stafford should be popped in there. James Conner had a massive week last week. I know because I had to watch it all happen in my face. 2 touchdowns, 69 yards, nice. 17 more through the air. 22.1 points. His best game this year. Obviously, he dealt with the injury for a while. Was kind of splitting a backfield with Eno Benjamin, but now with Eno Benjamin gone, you expect James Conner to fully be the workhorse that he was kind of projected to be with Chase Edmonds leaving town in the preseason. 21 carries last week. I expect that number to probably go up, especially if Kyler Murray can't play. But he does have a very, very tough matchup in San Francisco. In fact, the best run defense in fantasy football right now. I'm not going to look at real football. In fantasy, the worst matchup the running back can have. So if Kyler can't go and can't keep the defense at least a little bit honest, that it could be some tough sledding inside there. And then jumping over to David Montgomery, who should actually have a massive week. He's playing the Falcons. That defense is bad. And he gets David Montgomery will benefit from Khalil Herbert being put on IR. Herbert has been just stealing carries more and more all season. Kind of looking like he was going to take over as the lead back there. Definitely became more of a 50-50 split. But Khalil Herbert hurt himself. And so now We get full David Montgomery show against the Falcons defense that is not good. Deebo Samuel and I assume Brandon Ayuk. Yep, the double team there against a really, really bad Cardinals defense. So that could provide a spark there. And T. Higgins is back. Jamar Chase still not playing this week, I don't believe. I think they said week 12 was his earliest shot at going. So, you know, maybe we finally see the big T. Higgins game that we've been waiting on since Jamar Chase went down. Against the Steelers is a great is a great team to be playing. The second worst pass defense in the league. Just can throw the ball all day, and T. Higgins is a monster. And once again, the Bengals are wearing all white, so T. Higgins should have a big day. T. Higgins and David Montgomery are going to be what holds the team together. And if Ashley wants to pull a massive upset, they're going to be the one she's got to rely on. Tyler Higbee last week actually had a really solid week, 73 yards. Watching the Cardinals and Rams game, which I did, it was awful. It felt like every time John Wofford stepped back, Tyler Higbee was on the receiving end. So yeah, 8 catches, 73 yards, real big day for a tight end. With Matt Stafford back, we'll see if that continues. But once again, with Cooper Kupp out, you don't really have any receivers you trust on the outside. You have Van Jefferson, Allen Robinson, your number one options. Tyler Higbee, kind of, you know, one of the more seasoned guys in the Rams locker room. Could probably see some catches. And then I talked about Brandon Ayuk playing when I talked about Deebo Samuel. So, I mean, there is a world where I could see Ashley pulling this off. I mean, you know, you talk about 49ers having a massive game against the Cardinals. You need T. Higgins, a real chance to just do some dirty things to the Steelers defense. And David Montgomery just getting workhorse carries in Atlanta. But now I'm gonna poke holes in all these. T. Higgins, I don't see a world where T. Higgins scores less than like 15 points this week. I'm gonna be real honest. T. Higgins should have a massive week. James Conner gets an insane defense, and they'll probably be playing from behind. So I don't see a lot of room in the running game. David Montgomery should have a solid week, but Justin Fields just takes too many carries away. And then Deebo and Ayuk, you know, the 49ers could put up 50 points. They could also, but that's probably involving 350 rushing yards. So really only Deebo Samuel benefits from that if it happens. And it's not a ton now that McCaffrey's in town and Elijah Mitchell is very much okay. So for the sake of the prediction here, I mean, I'm going with Cameron. I'm just trying to spell out a world where Ashley could pull this together and pull off a massive upset. But yeah, the actual prediction, obviously, we're going to go with Cameron in this one. So now we get to one of two games between the people fighting for a playoff spot. That's myself and Charles. And it's just so beautiful to look at this lineup and see at the very top of my team, J. Herbert. Obviously, big trade with Wade this week. Sent him Miles Sanders for Herbert. A couple other, you know, I got Raheem Mostert and he got he got Trevor Lawrence. Justin Herbert hasn't had a stellar season. You know, he went 23 points. Actually, he was with 0.2 points his first 2 games of the season. Since then, it's been kind of rocky. Against Houston, he had a pretty good week, but everybody does against Houston. And hasn't broken 15 points the last 2 weeks, and then the bye, and then he had 17, and the week before that against Denver, which we've already established really, really good defense. He had 8 points. So, you know, he hasn't had the season we all expected. However, his next 5 games are Kansas City, Arizona, Las Vegas, and Miami. 5 very, very bad defenses. The other thing is Mike Williams will return to practice this week today, actually, and I'll take a look at that in a second. Keenan Allen, I also believe, is logging in limited practice. So he hasn't had weapons. The last 2 weeks he's been without either of his top targets. He hasn't played a super favorable schedule. Last week he played the 49ers. Week before that he played Atlanta. Probably should have had bigger numbers there. All right, something just hit my door. But before that he played Seattle, who sneaky has a good defense. Denver, Cleveland, Houston. Like I said, that's one of his better games. Kansas City. Anyway, this week against Kansas City, not a great defense. As far as getting his target back, Mike Williams, limited practice today. Keenan Allen also had limited practice. So with him getting a later start, there's a chance that both of them play, and that would be huge. I mean, that would just make the Chiefs Chargers game insane. On the flip side, Joe Burrow is coming off a bye and he gets the Steelers. I talked about it a little bit with T. Higgins. Have they played? Have this? Yes, they played in week 1. Joe Burrow went for 338, 2 touchdowns. Oh, that was the 4 interception game. So yeah. Could have had a big week. Oh, and he lost a fumble. So he lost 10 points off of turnovers. Take those away, he had 28 points. I mean, he just shredded the defense when he didn't turn the ball over. So I'm scared of Joe Burrow, and I really need all the facts that I just laid out for Justin Herbert to help keep up with things. The one good little silver lining about Joe Burrow playing the Steelers is hopefully they get up so fast that he doesn't throw the ball anymore. That would be really cool. We've talked all year about Charlie's dynamic duo at running back, Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb. Both have decently tough matchups this week. Derrick Henry has to go to Green Bay on a short week on Thursday and play the Packers. The Packers coming into the year were supposed to have a pretty good rush defense. I mean, the pieces are still there, but it hasn't really shown up. Last week, Tony Pollard had a pretty big week. They've given up some rushing yards, so that scares me. And on a Thursday night, you really trust Ryan Tannehill to throw the ball in Green Bay. On the flip side, Green Bay looks like they fully turned a corner. So that's my hope, is that that can carry over into this week. And the Titans are coming off a tough game against they played the Broncos last week. Yeah, they did. In that game, 53 yards, 14 through the air. 2 games before that, Derrick Henry had 4 touchdowns total in 2 games. Obviously, the Houston game where he put up over 200 yards, and against Kansas City, he 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. So we know what Derrick Henry can do. We also know what Nick Chubb can do. The good part of Nick Chubb, for me anyway, is that he's playing the Bills at noon on Sunday. Bills just lost a heartbreaker. So that could go one of 2 ways. I mean, they could come out flat. They just are dejected. The Buffalo team I've seen the last couple years, I don't think that's gonna be the case. I think they come out with a fire. I think they come out pissed off. So that's the narrative I'm trying to run with. The other thing is that there's supposed to be 2 feet of snow in that game, which means Nick Chubb's probably going to get a lot of carries. How much he can do in the snow, we'll see. I don't know. I've never seen Nick Chubb play a snow game. I'm ready for it. It's going to be sick. So that's me trying to talk myself into them not killing me this week. As far as my running backs, Jonathan Taylor, you sexy man. 23.3 points last week, 147 yards on the ground. His first touchdown since week 1, his first 100-yard game since week 1, which was cheating because he played the Texans. So I love Jonathan Taylor. I mean, the 66-yard run was awesome. He looks to be back. He gets the Eagles this week, who, as far as the Eagles having a great defense, they do. Nobody's taking anything away from that. The one thing that they do right now with Jordan Davis being out for at least a couple more weeks is they give up yards on the ground. Last week, Brian Robinson had 86 yards and a touchdown. I believe Antonio Gibson was around the same mark. In fact, do a quick stat check for everyone. I know you're all thrilled and ready to hear it. I'm just gonna fill some dead air real quick while this pulls up on my phone. Okay, all right. Washington versus Philadelphia. Box score. Nope, we want stats. The Eagles gave up 152 yards on the ground and 2 rushing touchdowns to the Washington Commanders. So you may look at the Eagles in the box and get nervous. I'm not. Mike Williams, if he plays, obviously if not, I'll be forced to start probably Brandon Cooks again, who also missed practice today. So that's real just fun and nice. So actually, no, I'm sorry. If Mike Williams doesn't play, I'm starting Rondell Moore on Monday night. Talked about the 49ers being, a great defense. They're kind of middle of the road against the pass. So, and I'm projecting that the Cardinals should be down very heavily in that game. So a lot of passings to go there. But banking on Mike Williams starting, I need that. That's my path. Terry McLaurin, also just a sexy, just beautiful man. I believe I needed 16.21 points on Monday night to win last week, and I got 16.8. Terry McLaurin literally caught a 41-yard pass to get to 16.8 and then dipped. So it got me over the mark, and then I don't think he didn't touch the ball again. On the other side, we have Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who kind of touchdown dependent. He's had a couple games where the yardage was high. Had 111 against San Francisco, 90 against Vegas. Last week he scored a touchdown, got him to 13.5 points, which was his highest output of the season so far. Kind of in the same boat as Mikol, where with actually he's questionable. Did not practice due to an illness. Which I didn't even talk about it, but Jamal Williams also did not practice with an illness, so that's fun. So 2 things to keep an eye on there. If he can't go, Charlie's got Amari Cooper, I guess, to put in a giant snow game and against Buffalo. So good luck with that. I mean, I guess you could put George Pickens in there and then run out. No, if he can't play, it's Amari Cooper. Anyway, so Amon-Ra St. Brown gets the Giants. Giants have a good defense, but the Lions just playing shootouts. Last week he had 119 yards, 17 total points. So for the Lions game, I don't even really know how to predict the Lions anymore. They just get into such weird, fun games. And then the tight end matchup, we have Gerald Everett, who is still questionable with a groin. Also limited to practice. Just another tick on the Chargers season. If he can't go, I don't know what I'm gonna do. So I guess I'll just pick somebody up off the waivers and pray. Probably Noah Gray, honestly. George Kittle. George Kittle had a big stretch there. Arizona's terrible against tight ends, so that's your plus. But I've talked about the Cardinal or the 49ers being up big, running the ball out, clock grind. So we'll see how that goes. But I mean, George Kittle had a stretch against the Falcons, Chiefs, and Rams where he put up 12, 18, and 12 again, or 11.4. Scored a touchdown in 2 of those games. So we know what George Kittle can be. It's just how much are they going to use him in the run game, as a blocker. How much are they going to try to go to him through the air? Really tough to pick. I mean, you also have down here Kyle Pitts playing Chicago, which personally would be who I started. But for my sake, I do hope that Charlie starts Kittle instead of Pitts. And as soon as Kittle scores 2 touchdowns and Kyle Pitts has 2 targets for 1 catch and 9 yards, you can all come back and laugh at me. And in the flex spot, Charlie, we've talked about it, hamstrung a little bit at wide receiver this week. With Amari Cooper just having a brutal matchup against Buffalo and just massive amounts of snow. So George Pickens going there. Bengals, pretty good pass defense. And George Pickens himself is incredible, but the guy who's trying to get him the ball is not. Cordero Patterson. As much fun as I had last week with Jonathan Taylor and Terry McLaurin, fuck everything about Arthur Smith and Cordero Patterson. Five rushes for 18 yards. Did have a catch for 2 yards. What the fuck was that? So they say that he was being rested for his injury, but he was out there returning kickoffs. We don't know, but now he's had 2 weeks to recover. The week before he had 44 yards and 2 touchdowns. Whatever. He's playing a really bad defense against Chicago. Arthur Smith, feed the fucking man. Yeah, you want Marcus Mariota throwing the ball? You can go fuck yourself. Give Cordero Patterson the ball. Let him do awesome things. All right. Anyway, that's done. Prediction. Yeah. Bet on yourself. I'm beating Charlie this week. So that brings us to our second matchup involving people who are fighting for a playoff spot, and that's Timmy and Andrew. Talked about it. Tim, winner, you're out. That's it. If you lose, you're eliminated. So no pressure, but if you lose, your season is literally over. As far as the actual matchup goes, Jalen Hurts gets the Colts for Andrew. You know, the Colts. This game is 100% going to depend on if the Colts are still riding the interim high, and also how well the Eagles respond to a loss. Now, if I trust any quarterback in the NFL to pop back after a loss and get the team together, it's probably Jalen Hurts, just as a human being. And even in the loss to Washington, he had a good game. I mean, 175 yards, 28 more rushing. He had 22 points, which is more than most quarterbacks are scoring in good games. 2 touchdowns through the air, and he ran one in. I mean, he's had a touchdown in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games this year, rushing. So Jalen Hurts' floor is extremely high just because he rushes the ball. He does. I mean, he has 2 games where he did not score 20 points. So expect 20 out of Jalen Hurts. Best case, you're putting up 30, 32 points. Josh Allen. Josh Allen. I love him. I love him so much. He had 84 yards rushing. He did fumble that lost the game. 2 interceptions, 330 yards. I mean, even in a terrible Josh Allen game, kind of the same with Jalen Hurts. Like, even in a terrible game, he's going to lead the team in rushing. In fact, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4 games with over 50 yards this year, and he's had at least 80 yards in back-to-back weeks. Unfortunately, that's meaning he's trying to Superman everything. And, both of those weeks he lost. And we talked about the snow in Buffalo. Josh Allen obviously going to be more used to it than Nick Chubb and the Browns, as far as those temperatures. But I think the reports there's also like 30-mile-an-hour winds this weekend. So I really don't know how much Allen's going to be able to throw the ball, which could be bad, good or bad. I mean, depending on how you look at it, because that means he's probably going to have to run the ball more because he's the team's leading rusher. As far as the running back matchups here go, Dalvin Cook and Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler, your RB1 so far this season. Came out slow. Has had a touchdown. Up until last week, he had a touchdown in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight games. And in 1, 2, 3, 4 of those, he had multiple touchdowns. So I kind of expect that to return a little bit. Now, if Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and Gerald Everett are already available to go, it's going to limit his touches a little bit more. But Kansas City, like I said, a little bit of a porous defense. There should be plenty of scoring opportunities to go around if all 3 of those guys are in the lineup. And Austin Eckler has been good. I mean, he's been insane. Dalvin Cook has also had a pretty decent stretch here. He's got a touchdown in 2 of his last 3 games. Actually, sorry, he's got a touchdown in 3 straight games because he had a receiving touchdown in week 9. So Tim very sneakily ended up with one of the better running back duos. I would say outside of Charlie, probably the best. Cameron's is up there too. Kamara and Saquon is so good. On the flip side, Andrew's got a couple little little scrappy guys here with Joe Mixon and Tony Pollard. Joe Mixon, I believe RB like, oh, he's 7. I thought he's gonna be like 4 or 5. Yeah, that's on me. He just gets touches though. Actually, even after the 53-point game, he was RB7. That doesn't feel right. Anyway, Joe Mixon in his first game since scoring 5 touchdowns and going over 200 all-purpose or scrimmage yards. Yeah, I mean he did that. That's exactly what he did. The weeks before that, he'd only had 3 total touchdowns, so I expect a little bit more of a regression to norm. The yardage probably going to be up because Pittsburgh is not insanely good. I did forget to mention in all of these Bengals topics that TJ Watt is back, so that could affect the Bengals' ability to throw the ball a little bit. Very unfortunate for the Bengals that they were in TJ Watt's last game before he got hurt, and his second game after he gets back. So, that could affect some throwing lanes, could affect Joe Mixon's ability to run the ball. I mean, TJ Watt is literally a game wrecker, a game changer. So, going back to all the Bengals, factor that into whatever I said. Tony Pollard, it's gonna depend on if Zeke can go. I think Tony's good enough to get him, to get his, whether Zeke is playing or not. But Jerry Jones and Mike McCarthy just have a rock hard penis for Zeke for some reason. I guess because he, was part of making the Cowboys good again. That probably has something to do with it, and they paid him a lot of money. If it was me running the team, Tony Pollard would touch the ball probably 20, 25 times a game. It's not me running the team, so he may not. If Zeke is out, he will. It's about as simple as that. And then you got Tyler Boyd. Same thing I've said for every Bengal. Jamar Chase is still out. The Pittsburgh can't stop the pass unless TJ Watt gets out there and eats again. So there you go. Just copy and paste whatever I said about T. Higgins and Joe Mixon right in there. Gabe Davis. I don't know what Florio had on his sit-em this week. I think I would probably sit Gabe Davis. And once again, because of the weather. A guy like, Josh Allen's other target, Stephon Diggs, he's more reliable over the middle in the short game. He's the guy that if you need to throw the ball 5 or 6 yards, you're probably throwing it to Stephon or Dawson Knox. Gabe Davis, being a burner, deep ball threat, that kind of guy is not going to work in 30-mile-an-hour winds and 2 feet of snow. So, not necessarily a matchup thing here, but a weather thing. So I don't know if you have another option. Thielen, Sutton. Actually, Sutton against the Raiders. Especially if Judy can't play. But I don't run your team, and you are currently ahead of me in the rankings, so listen to me at your own risk. And Travis Kelce against Dalton Schultz is one of the biggest mismatches I've ever seen. Talking about, I actually skipped over Tim's receivers here. Curtis Samuel is, to me, like a knockoff Gabe Davis. You're relying on the big play. You're relying on the the long touchdown chances, which he has been known to do. And he gets Houston this week, who I assume Stingley will be shadowing McLaurin. So open up some opportunities there. But CeeDee Lamb coming off just a monster game. 150 yards, 2 touchdowns, 32.5 points. Yeah, it's the first time he's had 100 yards this year. First time he's had more than 1 touchdown. In fact, he's only had 3 touchdowns all year total. So back-to-back good weeks for CeeDee Lamb. He's actually scored touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. So, and he gets a Minnesota defense that it can be thrown on. So, the other thing, Minnesota in a big letdown spot off of the huge Bills. And then getting into the flex, we have the Battle of the Panthers, which would be just a sick band name, I guess. Dante Foreman, my fault. No, it is Deontay. Whatever. Foreman versus DJ Moore. Yeah. I lean Foreman, obviously. you know, you don't have to have a quarterback that can throw the ball to get D'Onta Foreman the ball. So that's my analysis there. Whether it's PJ Walker or Baker Mayfield, you don't have to rely on him for D'Onta Foreman. So there you go. D'Onta Foreman wins that matchup. As far as predicting this week, I know I gave you the doomsday scenario of Andrew winning, eliminating 3 more teams from the playoffs. I don't think it happens though. I do think Tim gets the win. The website here has it as a 119 to 103 victory for Timothy. And I don't know if it's going to be that lopsided, but I do think there's too much firepower here for Andrew to overcome, especially when you start looking at Gabe Davis and DJ Moore being limited by weather and quarterbacks. So going with Tim on this one. And that will bring us to our final matchup, which is Wade versus John. Wade still fighting for a playoff spot. John, needs a miracle that I actually, once again, don't know is possible just based on the games remaining. Justin Fields. Holy shit. 178 yards and then 147 yards. He's been responsible for, 5, 6, 8 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. 5 through the air, 3 on the ground. 42 points and then 39 points. Yeah, holy shit. And then he gets Atlanta this week. And Atlanta's defense is very I think not good is what we would use in the profession. So yeah, Justin Fields is scary. I would say don't expect him to repeat a 40-point performance, but hell, at this point, who knows? Jimmy G. I talked about the 49ers with Debo and Ayuk. Copy and paste that one. Jimmy G at 16 points last week, solid bye week replacement. And gets a very favorable matchup with the Cardinals. And obviously there's just pass catchers and weapons all around him. So all he's got to do is throw the ball 5 yards and let somebody run at 80. Huge mismatch here in running backs. Christian McCaffrey and Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce probably on pace for Rookie of the Year. Yeah. At least 10 points in 4 straight games. Actually 5, 6, 7 straight games. Yeah, basically since taking over as the full-time workhorse, he has not gone under 10 points. His lowest point total was actually last week where he had 11.2. And it was only that low because he did lose a fumble. So Dameon Pierce, very good. Christian McCaffrey, I mean, he's just sick as fuck on the 49ers. Last week, I feel like he didn't touch the ball. Like we were watching the game, and I was like, "Oh, Christian McCaffrey really hasn't done anything." Oh, he has 16 points. Well, 15.7 points. Great. His first week against the Rams, 36.26. I mean, the ways they get on the ball is just insane. And actually, McCaffrey tripped on like the 3-yard line on a goal line carry, so he probably should have broken 20 again, realistically. And then Miles Sanders, who Wade just acquired in the Justin Herbert trade. Obviously, he was dealing with some bye week fuckery as well. He had Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert on a bye. We'll see if Elijah Mitchell sneaks his way into the lineup. We talked about McCaffrey, but Elijah Mitchell kind of had a solid enough game as well. 89 yards on the ground. Did have a reception for a yard. So kind of padded up his total there. But, I mean, he had a solid game. And once again, Arizona's defense, very, very vulnerable. So, like I said, we'll see if he sneaks his way in there. I mean, if he gets in the end zone, you're probably looking at a 13, 14-point player. But the yardage floor is absolutely there. Ramondre Stevenson has been forgotten about over the last few weeks, honestly. I haven't heard really anybody talk about him. I mean, he was on a bye last week, so that probably has something to do with it because I didn't hear his name called. But, I mean, same thing with Dameon Pierce. Has not gone under 10 points since week 3. Those totals 18, 10.9 was his lowest. 18.5, 23.1, 19.8, 17.8, 14.5. So really, really good season. He's a workhorse there. Has just, I think, fully eliminated Dameon Pierce from the conversation. Not Dameon Pierce, Damien Harris, sorry. So I expect that to continue. He does get a sneaky good defense in the Jets, but until the Jets can actually beat the Patriots, and I know they beat the Bills, so they're legit. But it's the Patriots. There's just something about them. I want to see it. Last time he played the Bills, which was played the Jets, which was 3 weeks ago. 71 yards on the air, 71 yards on the ground, 72 more through the air. So yeah, I do think the potential is obviously there. Justin Jefferson, holy fuck, he only scored 30.3 points. I say only. It feels like every single thing he did in that game should have been worth 30 points. Like, Justin Jefferson legitimately should have 120 points for what he did in that game against the Bills. It was insane. Gone over 100 yards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the last 6 weeks. And what, 7 out of 10 weeks. Last week 115. Sorry. 2 weeks ago 115. Last week 193 against the Bills. I think it was his career high. Topping 184 he had in week 1. So Justin Jefferson, fucking Jesus Christ. Just say he was a limited participant in Wednesday's practice. I assume that's just to get him some rest going, coming off that big game. On the other side, AJ Brown and Chris Olave. AJ Brown did get dinged up on Monday night, so he's coming back on Wednesday in a pretty short week. Colts have a really, really good secondary. He had 1 catch for 7 yards on Monday. So AJ Brown kind of turning into a little bit of a question mark now, this week at least. So worth keeping an eye on his injury, obviously. And then he actually does have a very, very tough matchup in Indianapolis, who is right now the number 1 defense against fantasy wide receivers. Chris Olave, I can start Jameis Winston. As long as Andy Dalton's the starter, I don't 100% trust Chris Olave. He's got a decent floor. Just fucking get Andy Dalton out of my fucking face. Mark Andrews is looking like he might play again this week. Still questionable, limited participant, but at least he's back in practice. And if Mark Andrews is there, has a potential to be a full-blown game changer. And making his what I believe is his Avenger League debut is Greg Dulcich, who's had a solid season. Las Vegas, obviously, bad defense, and realistically, if Dulcich had a quarterback that was even halfway reliable, he'd probably have a good season. Last week was his lowest total since kind of taking over. He's gone 11, 8, 10 bye week, and then last week he had 1 catch for 11 yards. That was against the Titans, who obviously are a much better team than the Raiders. So, and then the flexes. I mean, Jacoby Myers, like I said, keep an eye out, see if Elijah Mitchell sneaks his way in that flex spot. But right now it's Jacoby Myers, who, when they played the Jets 3 weeks ago, had 60 yards and a touchdown. So he had a good week. I'd say something nice about Jacoby Myers, I guess. Kadarius Toney looked fucking awesome last week. Had a 33-yard run, scored a touchdown, 57 yards, had 17 points. Kind of what we expected Kadarius Toney to be once he got to Kansas City. And also, I've talked about it with MVS and Nico Hardman. Actually, this week we have 3 Kansas City wide receivers starting. I don't think we've seen that in a while. I think it's just been Juju and, 4 if you want to count Travis Kelce. And very interesting. Probably because they're playing the Chargers, who have an awful secondary, or an awful defense. Secondary is actually pretty good. Asante Samuel Jr. As far as a prediction, this is actually really tough, and it's projected the closest game by NFL, 106 to 105, in favor of Wade, actually. And I am actually going to go with Wade too. John had a nice little resurgence there for a while. McCaffrey is just insane. But the combination of Justin Fields and Justin Jefferson, the Justin brothers, has been just, the last 2 weeks, so 80 from, round numbers, 80 from Fields and 52 from Justin Jefferson. So, yeah, Obviously, if they don't do what they've been doing, but Ramondre Stevenson, I think, is also going to be a key player this week too. So I'm going to go with Wade, keeping his playoff hopes alive. So to run down a recap, we have Trevor beating Raleigh. We have Cameron beating Ashley. We have myself beating Charlie. Tim beating Andrew, and Wade taking down John, which would mean that we go into week 12 with pretty much everybody that needed to win to make it interesting and complicated winning. That has been your preview. Good luck this week to everyone. Yeah, have fun out there.